Hey everybody, welcome back. I wanted to continue on in this mini app that we're building here. If you remember last time, we had fetched some data from an external API about basketball players. You can see that being console logged here. Our data array of 25 different basketball players with their JavaScript objects here. And you can see them being displayed on the screen in a list form. And we had used JavaScript event listeners along with the set attribute and get attribute methods so that when we clicked on a button next to a player's name, we get this window alert that says hi from that particular player. Let's take a look here at the code that created that. And you can see there in lines 15 through 21 or so, those three methods that I mentioned, add event listener, set attribute, and get attribute. Today, I'd like to add some more information to that window alert. So right now, when we click this button, it's just using the player's name to say hi. But you can see here that we have a lot of different attributes for those players, and I'd like to make use of some of those. So one way we could do is we could continue doing this the way that we did it last time. And if you remember, if I go over here into the Elements tab and look at one of these list items, I can see there's an HTML element for the player's name right on the button. And that's how we're actually accessing the player's name to display the message to the user. That's what we're doing there in line 18. So we could continue to do that. Theoretically, I could make an HTML attribute on every button for all of the different properties on the player object that we have that we got from the API. So in other words, their height, their position, their team, etc., etc. However, that could get pretty clunky. I don't really want to keep track of all of this information as different HTML element attributes. That's not really the point of those attributes, and it's just going to be a lot of different properties to keep track of. Instead, what I'd like to do is have a centralized location that stores all of the data for all of the players, and then we'll access what we need using one key or ID. So first, what I want to do in my JavaScript file is create a variable where we're going to store all of this information. So I'm going to put this variable actually outside of the DOM content loaded event listener because this variable is not, we don't need the DOM content to create this variable. And we'll just call it player info. So all of the information about all of the players is going to go into this object. Then, before I loop through the response data to create the HTML elements, so in other words, right here, I'm going to go through each player and add them to that player info object. So here, I could use another for loop, but I'll use a different JavaScript method, which is for each. So we're going to take our array, which is response.data, and then do .for each, and this takes a callback function that is going to accept as a parameter each individual object in the array. So we'll call this the player object. And then here, if we take a look at our player objects, you can see that every player object has an ID property. And we're going to use that to act as the key into our player info object. So what I can do here is I'm going to set on the player info object a key that's equal to the player object.id, and the value of that is going to be just the entire player object. All right, let's see if that works. Let's just go ahead and after this console log player info. Let's see, what's this error message here? Not important. Okay, let's save this. Go back to the browser, refresh. Response is not defined. Oh, I misspelled it. There was a problem there. Okay, save that. refresh. And you can see here that the array of the 25 players has been transformed into an object where the keys are equal to each player's ID. And so if we open one up here, you can see that on our player info object, the key of 71 now translates into the player whose object has an ID of 71, which is exactly what we wanted. So now let's make use of that information. Well, instead of setting an attribute on the button for the player name and the player height and all of the different attributes, in line 24, I'm just going to set an attribute of ID and set it equal to the player.id, right? And for now, I'm going to comment out all of this code in the event listener. And let's save that and refresh here and actually look into the HTML. Layer is not defined. Okay, where was that? That is in line 24. Okay. Refresh this and look into our Elements tab. And you can see here that our buttons now have an ID that is equal to the ID of that particular player. And now we can use that ID to access the information about the player in the onClick handler. So if we go back now to this code that I commented out, we're not going to get the player's name directly in line 27. We're going to get the clicked player's ID, and we're going to get the attribute of ID. And then let's create a new variable called var clicked player info. And here we're going to use that player info variable or object that we created in line 1. And we are going to key into it using the clicked player ID. Let's for now just console log clicked player info, comment this out, and let's confirm that when we click on a player's button, we get the information about that player. So if I click here, you can see I'm getting the object for that particular player. Likewise for any of the players. And finally, we can use any of the properties from this object to create the message that we want to show to the user. So let's go ahead and we'll just use the player's first name. We'll use their position and something about their team. So let's make our message here. Clicked player name no longer exists. So this is going to be clicked player info dot first name. Let's go with says hi, and we'll say I play, and now we'll use their position info. So clicked player info dot, what was the property? Dot position. For. And now we'll use the nested property clicked player info dot team dot city. And we should be able to just display that message to the user. Let's see if this works. I'll refresh this and click a player's name here. Marshawn says, hi, I play undefined for Memphis. Okay, we made a mistake. Let's see Marshawn's player object here. Position should be G for guard. Did I misspell that? Position. My spelling is not very good today. Let's save this, refresh this, and click a button. I play G guard for Toronto. So we have successfully turned our player array into a player info object and used the ID property to key into that and create whatever custom message we want using any of the attributes available to us. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time.